guys, good morning. Hopefully you can all hear and see us perfectly well. Welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator. My name is Mike Dixon. I lead the Sales and Marketing Division here at AXR Recruitment Search, and over 20 years as a professional recruiter, I have seen the careers of way too many people narrow and plateau before they reach their full potential. And in this Sales Director Incubator, what we're going to do is understand why this happens and help future leaders like you to make better career decisions, prepare you to have better career conversations to help you maximize your potential. And over the next 6 months, I'm going to be interviewing 12 sales directors in 2 blocks or 2 seasons to learn about their career journey, how they've gained the experiences and skills to reach that level. And we'll look at successes, failures, lessons learned along the way. Today I'm joined by Louise Baker. Hi,
Hello.
Louise.
Hello, Mike, and hello, everybody.
How are you today?
Very well.
Excellent, yeah. Excellent. Louise is one of Australia's most highly regarded sales directors. I've known Louise for many years, and over the last 20 years, she's got experience in commercial, strategic FMCG roles. Most recently as Senior Sales Director of PepsiCo here in Australia, began her career in the UK back at P&G. And her first role, I believe here, was in Goodman Fielder.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and before your first sales director gig with Frucor Centauri, which I think where we first met.
Absolutely.
And Louise has got a real passion for coaching and training, which is one of the reasons I think you're keen to be part of this program.
Absolutely.
And you run your own consultancy called the Capability Centre as well, which gives you an idea of Louise's commitment to this this part of developing people. But outside of work, to give you a bit of insight into Louise, she can be found running around the Northern Beaches with her husband and 3 boys, and is a real adventure traveller. Has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, walked the Inca Trail, trekked Grand Canyon, done all sorts of different things. And but back in the day, I think studied biological sciences at Oxford.
I did.
Yeah, which is very, very sensible.
Done your homework.
Yeah, and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors as well. So welcome to Louise. Before we get into it, and it's been a really interesting session in terms of finding out about Louise's background and Louise's career. There's a lot of people on the call today, so thank you everybody very much for joining us, the first of the sessions. You're all muted, not because we don't hear from you, we do, but there's just so many that would be very challenging to manage everyone's sort of questions as we go. So use the chat facility. We'll see that as we go, so just feel free to put anything in there, and we'll try and monitor questions, and if we think they're relevant, we'll jump in and answer them as we go, or we'll get to them at the end. We've certainly allocated enough time for that. We've got an hour, so we've started pretty much bang on. We'll finish at 9, because a lot of people have got meetings. We know whilst we're living in strange times, we still have schedules to keep, so we'll get you done as soon as we can. So let's get into it. So we'll start with chatting a little bit about your adventure travel, but let's maybe talk a bit more about you as an individual, Louise. You know, what do you do outside of work? What's the big thing that isn't FMCG sales for you?
Yeah, good question. Probably too much. So for quite a while, I was being a scout leader as well. I played soccer. To your point, I love traveling, trekking, etc., seeing a bit of the world, and especially where there's animals. So I can't get past Africa. I just love Africa. And I've been off for a while since Pepsi, and going back to a completely different than corporate world. I've been writing, and I do a lot of creative writing, would you believe?
Okay.
And I'm currently 3/4 of the way through inventing a game. So
okay.
Yeah, just creative stuff when I'm not in the corporate world.
So, so sports, adventure, creativity, arts, literature.
Yeah, so how did I end up in sales? I don't know.
It sounds like a game of Trivial Pursuit, doesn't it?
There you go.
Well, after you finished at uni, what took you into sales? What was your first kind of job, proper job?
Well, I actually had done a fair bit in sales even before uni, because I helped out with my dad's business. He had a wholesale business. I used to be on the phone at Christmas getting the pharmacist to order. But once I was at uni, I realised that I did enjoy that part of selling. So I looked up who the really good businesses were for sales and landed on Procter & Gamble. So went to Procter & Gamble in their sales team. And you start out in the field, which I think is somewhere that every salesperson should spend at least a bit of their career. So I had 6 months knocking on doors of pharmacies, looking after Max Factor Cosmetics.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that was the first role. I think it's I think that's awesome. I think going into the field is the first role in anyone's career, no matter where you end up. I think it's a wonderful way to start.
Yes.
And it's actually a challenge I think we have, because field teams are a lot smaller nowadays.
It's true.
So that stepping stone role into the world of FMCG in particular has been narrowed a little bit. So I think that's something we have to address as an industry. But so let's kind of look more broadly at your career. And I'd love to kind of just identify a couple of key moves that you might have made. So let's kind of look first of all at the most significant reactive or unplanned move. What was that, and how did that happen?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. And for me, the biggest thing that was unplanned was my own business, was Capability Centre. So I'd just seen a career mapped out that was sales, corporate world, and then I left my first husband. And I'm on the second and final, so just in case people think we're going through a list. Basically, though, that led me to need more time with my family. I've got 3 young boys, so I set up my own business to give me the opportunity to do that. And I thought it would just be a placeholder, and I didn't recognise how much that was going to build my skill set. And because it was an organisation, sort of capability building business, I did training, coaching, etc. I had to really learn a number of tools like Grow. I had to learn how to coach and really master that. I learned neuro-linguistic programming, psychological profiling, and it's amazing how much those things have actually been invaluable as a leader then back in the corporate world, which is really where the heavy lifting of my career has been. So that was a sort of blessing in disguise and really unplanned.
Yeah, so reacting to the moment in a very kind of positive way. And looking at the converse of that, has there been a time in your career where everything's come together? The planning has worked, you've identified an opportunity, gone for it and got it?
Yeah, I think for me, the first sales director role, so Frucor Suntory would be that one. And basically I identified that I was really ready to step up. There wasn't going to be the opportunity at Goodman Fielder, so I obviously went out to the market, let people know I was looking, and in fact leveraged the network, and somebody recommended me to Frucor. The interesting thing there, when you say, is it planned, it actually took a lot of effort, because Frucor were really looking for somebody who had particular experience, and it wasn't the experience I had. They wanted route experience, petrol and convenience experience, and my background had been almost purely grocery. So I remember phoning Darren Park, who I didn't know. Somebody just said, he's a great guy, he's in petrol and convenience, he heads the United Convenience Buyers team, he's the CEO there, and he's a lovely bloke. So I'm like, okay. So I gave him a call. You don't know me, I'm going for a job at Frucor, I might not even get it, can I please come and meet with you? And Darren was amazing. He gave me 2 hours of his time over coffee, talked to me about the industry, talked to me about Frucor Suntory, and it really equipped me to then go into my interviews with Frucor with, not a great knowledge base from 2 hours, but a decent knowledge base, but also being able to demonstrate to them that I actually had the capability to make the connections and start to understand the industry pretty quickly, despite having not come from there. And they took a bit of a chance on me, I have to say. Yeah. But I believe you make your own luck, and yeah.
That's interesting. I love the fact you identified somebody in the market that could help you.
Yeah.
And I think often people think in very narrow terms when it comes to their network and who do I know immediately, and often feel a little bit reticent to pick up the phone or to leverage that network. But networks are there for a reason.
Absolutely.
And there'll be a time when Darren might want to speak to you and pick your brains and get help from you. You're always going to say yes. And in my experience, candidates or anybody really, depending on your at any stage in your career, who leverage that network and pick up the phone and ask for help. They get it. People are very free and willing about it. I think that's awesome. That's a really powerful lesson, actually.
Yeah.
What back to your career? I think one of the interesting transitions to leadership, Louise, is when you move from being operational to strategic. Someone, if you're thinking from a sales context, if you're operational, it's about what's in front of me, my number, my business plan. I've got to deliver that. And strategic is starting to think, well, I'm the one who decides what the number is going to be, because the plan is up to me. At what point in your career did you make that transition? And is it something you felt happen, or did you look back and think, well, that was a change?
I remember it really well, and the reason I remember it is probably the most scared I've been in my career. So I came back from maternity leave into at Procter & Gamble UK into a sales manager role, which is the equivalent of a national business manager here. So it was my first sort of leadership role. Until then, yes, you can lead at any level, you can impact strategy, you can have ideas, you can challenge numbers, and you should. But this was the role where it was my accountability. And I came in looking after 11 brands that weren't on TV, that Procter & Gamble, the company in the UK, decided we could do more with, but didn't really know how to. Gave me access to 42 account managers to go and get the stuff sold, half a finance resource, and me. And I remember thinking, my goodness, can I even do this? Because until then I'd just been one piece in a bigger team all the time instead of having to own it. And literally I sat down and I made a one-pager for each brand, kept it as simple as I could, because it was only parts of all these other people's businesses. Did one pager with a clear vision, clear strategies. I renegotiated with Geneva how we did funding. Remember, that was quite a tussle. Made them give me something very flexible so that the team could operate with much more agility, and pulled it off with help, and again reaching out to people, bouncing ideas off people, making sure that I was on the right track, and delivered 20% of the Procter & Gamble Health and Beauty Care profit that year. And got on the radar, and also built huge resilience and confidence, knowing that something that had really, I was very apprehensive about, was okay.
I think it's quite a pivotal time in someone's career, and I think some people step up to the plate, and some people struggle with that. What would your advice be in terms of, facing into that strategic or the opportunity to think and operate more strategically?
Yeah, I think a few things, Mike. So first of all, back yourself. You've just got to have a go. Know that nobody is running a parallel experiment. So nobody else is running 5 other enterprise businesses on the side to see whether theirs is better than yours. So, you can have a crack at things, and they might work, they might not work, but you know that you can change those as you go. And there isn't just one way to do anything. Reach out to your network and sense check with other people. You don't need to do any of this on your own. And for me as well, when it comes to strategy and leadership, be really clear on the process or the system that you're adopting, because for me, knowing what a good strategy looks like on a page really helped me to bring clarity for that business. And that might be something that you can steal with pride from somewhere else or read in a book, or it doesn't matter, but you don't have to work it all out for yourself.
An interesting follow-up. In interviewing people over many, many years, I think sometimes people demonstrate the ability to think beyond their role. And do you see, or have you experienced occasions where people have started to operate strategically before you expect them to? So they've started to try and flex that muscle or have a go to think like that before the role says they really should?
Absolutely. So there's always times where people lift their head up and they see the impact of what they're doing in the longer term, or they notice something that the customer's starting to do. And for example, when we moved to down, you could see the people who, and when the industry moved, you could see the people who sort of recognised that this was going to have impact longer term, that we needed to be able to navigate, and started to gather the cross-functional teams together to get a shared understanding of what that might be and how we might navigate the new environment. Even when they were sort of NAMs on a business, they were looking longer term. And I think with that and that sort of strategic lens, those are the people actually who you start to get on your talent lists, and start to spend more time mentoring and coaching, because they obviously have the right sort of mindset to go a little bit beyond and to join those dots.
Great, excellent. Was there a stage in your career when you felt, you know what, I could be a sales director, and I'm going to set myself a goal now to achieve this? Did that happen to you?
Yes and no. So it's really interesting that I've always wanted to go as high as I can go. And I think, you know, when you asked me a little bit about myself before this, and I was saying, for me, I hope anyway, that I'm about confidence without ego. So what's driven me most is wanting to bounce out of bed, keep being stretched, keep being challenged, and having variety. And if there's anything that I really want to avoid, it's being bored. So that's actually led to me stretching myself, taking on different things, which has then opened up the next opportunity. Having said that, there was a time at Procter & Gamble when I looked at, I remember him very well, Andrew Garden, who was a sales director at the time. And I remember looking at him and thinking, I'd love to be you one day. Just his calm approach, he was very considered. He had tremendous insight, incredibly strategic, but he was the first sales director I'd looked at who I felt had people at the heart.
Right.
And that, for me, he was a role model that I thought, that's the sort of sales director I hope one day I can be. So yes, probably from that point on, it became crystallized. But absolutely, it's, for me, it's just about keeping growing and wherever that takes me.
I think that's very important, that point you made within that about role models. I think sometimes, because role models can come from anywhere, your organization or otherwise, but that's what you often aspire to. And sometimes, you know, you might look at your boss's boss and think, I'm not sure I'm entirely inspired by you, but that shouldn't really just detract your ambition. You know, it's about thinking, well, identifying perhaps, well, what is it about that person's style or leadership that I'm not so inspired by? But what are my values, and where do I see that reflected in other leaders?
Absolutely.
And that's how you build your role models.
Yes.
And how you aspire to. Interesting. Very, very interesting. In terms of, again, your career path and career journey, Louise, what do you think was the biggest career decision to date that you've had to make?
Gosh, there's been a couple really that I think have been big decisions. One of them was stepping outside of the corporate world and doing my own thing. And again, recently leaving Procter & Gamble actually. And while they're not, you were probably expecting I'd answer with decisions that were sort of proactively progressing my career, but actually the biggest ones have been the ones that I know potentially are going to put the career on hold a bit or potentially slow down the career. And for me, I think whenever we're working, we're in a big system that's beyond work. And I think managing that dynamic across family and work is really important. And not being afraid about the impact that will have, because I've certainly found I've been able to step back in and move into roles that have been really exciting, really progressive for me. And the experience I've had whilst I've been out has always added some value, as I described earlier with Capability Centre. And I think a lot of females, particularly when they go on maternity leave, and men now with parental leave being extended, can think, is this the right thing to do? Do I show a lack of commitment? Should I step out or not? Absolutely, you need to do what's right for your broader life. You've only got to look yourself in the mirror. And when you're ready to step back in, it'll be amazing. You'll be amazed, I think, at what skills you've developed through stepping out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty powerful, and you'd hope in society today. I think if we've learned anything over the last few months, is that perspectives are really important, and the linear path that we're all on, often that we feel we're on, if that is disturbed, it doesn't actually change your life. Often it can enhance it and improve your perspective. So
absolutely. And then probably within work, one of the biggest decisions I made was to do a broadening assignment in marketing. And again, it's another decision where I sat and thought, gosh, if I stay in sales, I'm probably going to move upwards faster. Whereas if I go to marketing, there's a risk that, it's a sideways move that may slow my upward progression by how, it was only a year that I did, but actually in retrospect, I don't think it slowed anything down.
Yeah.
And then later on, it's been really valuable having that experience, not just having it on my CV, but also knowing a little bit about another function in a more connected way.
Yeah, great. We'll come on to broadening in a second, but conscious we've got lots to get through. So let's look at perhaps some of the support that you've received along the way and how you've leveraged that. You talked a bit to that earlier on, but was there a role or perhaps even a leader in your career that has that gave you confidence in yourself?
Yeah, I think, look, you take confidence out of every role, and you've got to look yourself in the mirror, and it's got to come from you, really. But I think the enterprise business that I described at Procter & Gamble was a pivotal confidence, resilience moment for me. Another one was the first sales director role, and going, again, it really is on me. But every role, the first pharmacy that I went into, the first day of my sales career with Procter & Gamble, just knowing that you can walk in there and you can actually do it and you can have a conversation, and it wasn't perfect, but you got somewhere and they bought some things and there's things to build on. You can take confidence out of everything.
So I think what you're describing there is just you can stay in your comfort zone and not do those things.
That's true.
Or you can step out. And every time you step out, whilst it can be bloody challenging and scary, you're actually building your confidence.
That's spot on. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Great. Think about when things perhaps don't go so well, because we learn a lot from when it goes well. But if you reflect back on perhaps pieces of feedback that you've had, Louise, in your career, what's a particularly tough piece of feedback you might have had?
Yeah. Well, apart from, I get my hardest feedback actually from my kids and my husband.
Yeah.
So I remember my 9-year-old at the time, he's now 15, saying to me one day, "Mum, if you use less words, we could have a better conversation."
Oh, that's awesome.
So I took that to work as well. That was very good. But I think the biggest I think the best feedback, I always get feedback. It's hugely valuable. You've got to keep asking for it. And then, it's up to you which bits you act on, but I do try and act on feedback that I get as much as I can. The biggest bit is probably a blind spot where I just hadn't noticed, where Andrew Hipperson at Goodman Fielder, he's passed away since then, but he was my MD at the time. And I just moved from National Business Manager of Baking to take on all of the Coles business for Goodman Fielder, including groceries, so 17 categories. And there was so much to do. And we'd got profit issues. I'd inherited some D-lists that we had to fix. Down was quite new. I'd really pushed the organisation hard. We launched a new bread brand at a $2 price point to combat down in 10 weeks from start to finish. He took me on one side and just basically said, take a breath. You're trying to do too much too quickly. And I hadn't noticed. And he really made me connect to the impact that would have on people, what really was realistic, what's stretching but possible for this organisation. And that's something I've taken with me ever since, and think is a critical part of certainly a leader's role to allocate the resources in a realistic, sustainable way.
Maybe relates a bit to my next question, which is around an experience perhaps you reflect back on when things went wrong. And look, we all have them. Where it's gone wrong, but it's actually stuck in your mind and becomes a bit of a trigger to you to reflect on, to think, that's my learning point. I go back to that's an experience or an issue I had
Yeah.
that I use positively as a learning going forward?
Yeah.
What would that be?
Well, one of those I'd say probably, I mean, there's been plenty on the way, but through Course Suntory, we were really keen to broaden the footprint really into food and beverages with food. And we identified a distributor who was really confident that he could take our range into his portfolio and help us get where we needed to get to. Unfortunately, 3 months down the line, we found out that he couldn't actually flex some of the arrangements he had and couldn't accommodate our brands after all. And for me, the big learning there was we did have a plan B, but it had been heavily on the back burner.
Right.
So for me, it was learning that if something is outside of your control and you really are reliant on something else happening out there, then you've got to be doing your plan B and you've got to be working them both. So yeah, we had to be really agile to turn that around and unlock a new route to market, which we did. But if we'd been doing that and the whole way, I think it would have been a much stronger position.
Yeah. So when you have to lean on Sunday, you're relying on somebody else. That's okay. You have to do that, but make sure there's a backup.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't control
yes,
the outcome always. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
And what about going forward for you? What does the future look like? What is the next role, do you think, for you? And what do you think you need to do to get there?
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I've been thinking about that a lot, obviously, because I've taken a bit of a break to look after my son who's sick with chronic fatigue, but I've just reached out in the last probably 3 weeks to recruiters and gone, I'm ready now to start looking to come back. I think I really do hope that I've got the next level in me. So I'm looking to keep progressing my career. As I said, I want to bounce out of bed doing things that are stretching me and exciting me. So I'd like to get to MD, CEO someday, if I can. I understand, though, that about half of those roles are going to come from within organisations. So I'm really looking to step back in as a sales director with a view to hopefully continuing to build that cross-functional leadership skill set to then make that move up in the future if that becomes the right thing.
Fantastic. Well, if I can help you along the way, I'd love to.
Sure you can.
Okay, let's move on to the next sections. I want to talk a bit about given your career and experience you've had of working with people, developing people, your coaching mindset, grow mindset. Let's maybe look at advice you would give others, Louise.
Yeah.
So I mentioned at the start that my biggest frustration as a recruiter is seeing people who've got potential who never quite realize it.
Yeah.
They get stuck in a dead-end alley or they make a poor career choice and they find it very difficult to move forward. Why do you think some people don't realize their potential?
Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons. And some of it is luck. And while I do prescribe to the idea that you make your own luck, I do think some people are there in the right place at the right time. I certainly feel that that's happened to me. There's often more capable people available for a role, and there's only one role. So there is a little bit of that. But I think that some people don't always realise their potential because they just don't believe enough in themselves. They don't back themselves. They don't ask for the opportunity. So you need to have the courage to go out there. You know, if I hadn't believed that I could manage route and petrol and convenience, even though that wasn't in my experience set, I would never have persuaded Frucor that I could do that. And I would never have gone on to have 3 wonderful years in that organisation. So you've got to back yourself. I think the other thing is keep investing in your development and take every opportunity you can. So if you really are in the wrong role, look to move and get another role, but also think about what else you can learn in that role. How can you connect differently, cross-functionally? How do you get on different projects that will really help you make a difference? And think about the work only you can do, because the stuff that only you can do is the things that other people really notice your impact from, and those things help you start to actually fulfill your potential.
Okay. Yeah, good points. I think that again, back to that whole piece around backing yourself and pushing yourself beyond what might be the obvious and out that comfort zone is coming through. And when you have a career conversation with
Mhm.
a member of your team or perhaps somebody you're mentoring, when do you think, great, that's excited me,
Yeah.
or oh no, this is so frustrating? Because I talk to a lot of sales directors and marketing directors who find career conversations perhaps as uninspiring as the person they're having the career conversation with does. And this is one of my big challenges to try and help that.
Yeah.
But in your experience, when
Yeah.
does it kind of go well? When doesn't it go
Yeah.
well?
Well, you can probably guess that with my background at Capability Centre and the real focus there on coaching, for me, if you're having a proper career conversation, you are actually using the GROW model, and you are identifying goals, you are looking at options, you are deciding which ones to go after. So the ones that really excite me are when you use that process and get to somebody's really underlying why. Start with Simon Sinek, start with why.
Yeah.
What is their real motivation? And when they're open-minded about all the different paths that can get them there and the different opportunities, that's really exciting, because you can see that there's not this limited view. And conversely, the things that I find frustrating is when you're with somebody who's got a very fixed view about the timeline or the particular roles, or they'll only work on Coles and Woolworths, or, you know, and getting people to have that broad view, to really understand that there's value in many different experiences, that the T-shaped career is important, is great. So, you know, I had a commercial finance manager who under me switched to do a sales role to broaden. And I spoke to her actually just last week, and she's loving it. And similarly, on the frustrating side, there was somebody who really didn't want to do a particular role with a particular business, and a few people let him know that it was a really good opportunity for him, because although it wasn't Coles or Woolies, it was an area that PepsiCo was really prioritising, where there was massive cross-functional interaction. It would be a huge development and really get him on the radar. Luckily, he slept on it and came back to do the role, and hasn't looked back, and is doing really very well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Great. It's as a recruiter, it probably feels the same for me. So candidates I interview, some are very open-minded, and some are clueless, and that's the worry. They'll go anywhere, do anything. That you need a bit more direction than that.
Yes.
Some are fixated in one particular role, and it has to be that role, nothing else. As a title or as a customer, and that can be quite narrowing as well. So you're looking for somebody who's got open-mindedness, but ambition and clarity as well. A growth mindset is a perfect way of putting it, actually. Okay. Looking broadly at the role of a sales director. For those of you who filled out the survey, thank you. We've probably not got enough through yet to get some real data points. So we will send another link through after this. We'd love you to fill it out, because we're asking what are the kind of the most important attributes that make up a sales director. And I think we'll get some interesting kind of feedback through that. But if we were to pick three from your perspective, Louise, what would the top three be in your mind?
I think for me, leadership, and I know that's quite broad scope, but in any sort of leadership role, you've got to be able to set direction. It's really important. Then to be able to allocate your resources. So that would be the second thing, as I said. And that was big learnings for me through the time. And then people as a leader are really key. So enabling, motivating, coaching those people. One of my favourite books is Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. And that's about how the best leaders bring out the genius in others.
Okay.
So no, it's in there somewhere. We all have leaders where we've gone home and gone, I'm so much better than this. And similarly, we've had leaders where we go home and go, wow, I didn't know I could do that. And I think that is the key to amazing leadership, unlocking that genius.
So that's by Liz Wiseman?
Yes.
Called?
Multipliers.
Multipliers, okay.
And how, I think it's multipliers and how the best leaders make everyone smarter. But basically multipliers,
Great, okay. Well, once again, guys, if you could fill out the survey, that would be great, because we'll publish the results, and in future sessions with in the program, we'll come back to that data, because I think it'll be really interesting to see. But so how do you as a sales director consciously go about building experiences that are going to develop those competencies, those traits?
I think keep learning. So you can learn outside of work or within work, but in terms of training courses, reading books, there's Harvard leaflets, McKinsey, etc. There's lots of good stuff out there that can keep driving and growing you. I think within your roles, it's connecting. You can't underestimate the impact of growth that comes from cross-functional work. So I think even when you're doing simple projects through to really complex things that need full project management, working and interacting across the business, I think really helps shape the breadth that you need to keep being able to grow and progress into those leadership positions.
Yeah, and it brings us on to the next point, which we touched on. And for those of you who know me for a while, you've heard me talk quite a lot about McKinsey and their T-shaped career and their model. And for those who haven't, I'll sum it up very briefly. But McKinsey have a model which they use to assess the upward mobility of a leader. Right. So when they're looking at a business, they will look at the potential of a leadership group or future leaders and understand, who's kind of at their level and who's got the grow potential. And they look at the T model, which is to say the vertical end of the T being functional expertise. So where's the home turf? Where's this person, really, really strong at? And everybody's strong in one space. But those who've got upwards potential have got this platform that sits along the top, which makes the T. And those are the cross-functional experiences, the other markets, categories, whatever they've been involved in, give them a broader platform to grow. So it's a really interesting model, and one that I talk a lot about in terms of giving career advice and helping people with their career decision making. You've touched on it there, Louise, in terms of how important it is gathering that kind of breadth. Is there any of the benefits that you see to that T career?
Yeah, well, I think exactly what you've said, which is that sort of complementary skill set that sits on the top of the T, which enables you to just have more awareness and knowledge across disciplines that then helps you to leverage the other functions within your organization as you progress, which becomes increasingly important. I think as well for me, that top of the T is also about some of the what we would call softer skills, but they're really important around empathy, collaboration, just the more that you've had different experiences, the more chance that you've been exposed to needing to put yourself in other people's shoes and navigate situations that are outside the norm. And I think they are where the strength comes from to equip you later on. It also builds resilience and confidence. Again, going back to that growth mindset, again, which enables other people to see you as somebody who probably can function being stretched out of their comfort zone, which of course is exactly what happens whenever you are stepping up in a career.
It's I like that point on collaboration and seeing things from other perspectives. When I interview candidates and for roles, one of the things I'm looking for is that ability to problem solve and understand how you've delivered a result, but not just from your own point of view, but how you brought others along for the journey. And to do it effectively, if you have that T-shaped career, then you've often sat with and alongside people from other functions. You understand how they operate, what's important to them, what their agendas are, and how you can align agendas and plans so that you all win, you all get there. And so I think it's a really interesting point of view. It's not just I get how supply chain works, or I understand how different customers work. But if you can see from the individuals who work in those functions perspectives, then you're more powerful as an individual. You can have more impact.
Absolutely.
And when you're recruiting, because we talked a bit about when I interview, but when you recruit, and you've done a lot of that in your time, and you're either looking at external or internal talent for a role, do you find yourself looking for particular triggers that make a candidate stand out?
Well, it's actually interesting. You were just saying about people who can do the problem solving and can solve problems, overcome barriers, etc. Because for me, I do look for people who I can see have gone a little bit above and beyond in whatever they've done. So, because that's where the magic comes. Somebody who's looking for that little extra bit that unlocks a new direction, a new idea, and those things can be really valuable to an organisation. And also, if to go above and beyond, often you've had to overcome a problem, a challenge, or appeal to other people and really show leadership. And I think, you know, we look to our leaders to show leadership, but I think leadership is something that the best of us can demonstrate at any level in an organisation, because at a lower level, it's about just impact and influence. It's having an idea of what you're trying to achieve and being able to bring people on that journey with you. I look for that. And then in terms of personal traits, I think, you know, the people who I'll notice more in an interview are the ones who take the business seriously, but they don't take themselves too seriously. Because again, those people are more likely to be able to come into a team, be a bit vulnerable, say what they're really thinking, let you know when they don't have all the answers, and they're much more likely to have that collaboration, a bit more empathy, and I think that does lead to better results.
It's an often overused word, authenticity.
Yeah.
But I think people often see an interview or a recruitment process as somewhere where they walk in with a suit of armour on. You know, they've got to put the best foot forward. But the magic happens for me when somebody actually, you see the real person.
Yes.
And they talk about, you know, how they've done something, but how it went wrong and how they learned and how they made a mistake, but how they brought, how they had to deal with it. And if someone can bring that level of authenticity and vulnerability to the process, it is way ahead of the veneer and the super polished person who thinks they've nailed the interview, but they probably haven't.
No, that's very, that's spot on. And I think, you know, we're recognizing as an industry, I think nowadays, that curiosity, that learning mindset, the ability to recognize and then adapt is incredibly important. And you know, the environments that we work in now are just getting faster all the time, and that agility and ability to learn and change is key.
So we've got this far without mentioning COVID, which is probably the longest I've ever
we are gone. Nicely distant.
Yeah. This is appropriately socially distant. But you know, as a leader, what impact do you think COVID will have on careers?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question, and obviously for me, again, front of mind, looking for my next role. I think it's made people less likely to move at the moment. There is some moves, but often they're just obviously within the domestic market. So at a more senior level, I'm noticing some of the international moves in the past that have knocked on that domino effect aren't happening. I think people are hunkering down a little bit. But I think there's a lot of positives coming out of it in terms of the agility that people have had to adapt to this environment and overcome the challenges and be able to, you know, adapt supply chain, offers, promotions, etc. All these things I think are helping grow learning and capability going forward. And I think as well, it's really unlocked much more use of technology, much more flexibility, working from home, etc. That I think is going to have an impact on how we operate going forward.
It's certainly changed the way we all work, but we see it positively as well in terms of I think we'll all go back to I think working. Someone asked me actually yesterday, said who lives in Dubai, said, "Oh, we're all back at work. Are you guys not back at work?" And I said, "Well, we've not stopped working, and we're working from home and from the office right now. It's a blend for most people, and I think that blend will continue." Whereas his mindset was, "Well, I'm back 5 days a week, so." And I thought, have you learned nothing
exactly
from this? But everyone to their own. And to conclude, before we jump into questions from the chat, and we had a number submitted beforehand, Louise. If you could give 3 pieces of advice to somebody who's perhaps thinking on today's call, I really do think I've got, you know, the potential to be a senior leader, whether it's a sales director or any other you know, leader in an organization. What 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
Yeah, okay. Hard to keep it just to 3, but I will. I think the first one is really be open to sideways moves. Don't always be looking for the next step up immediately. And you know, cross-functional projects, etc., that we've talked about are really important. I think Chris Bergen, who is going to do one of the sessions
yes, he is, yeah.
with you, so I'll credit Chris. He said to me once, your career is more of a jigsaw, isn't it, than a ladder? And I'm like, absolutely. And the more you view it that way, I think the better it will be for the longer term. The second thing is just keep learning. So invest time and energy in your own development. We often overlook that, get head down, bum up, and just do the job, but keep asking for feedback. Keep going and taking learning opportunities, and also look for a coach or a mentor. They can be really informal, somebody within your organization that will really help give you perspective and unlock. And then the third thing for me is just believe in yourself and ask for that opportunity. So make sure you have had a career conversation with your manager and you are clear on what your goal is and how you might get there, so that you're on the radar for the things that are going to be important to you. And even if you're not sure that you're ready for a role, go and have a crack, because the best way to get on a radar, even if your sales director or your national business manager or whoever it is your manager is saying to you, you're not ready yet, they at least know that you're hungry for it, and then they will want to invest more time in you, getting you ready as soon as you can be.
Yeah. Great. It's not just going to happen to you. Sometimes it does.
Yeah, it can do. It
but
can be that.
Those who try and make it happen,
yeah,
have got more chance of,
yes.
of getting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, be patient and be open to broader things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was speaking to a sales director the other day whose frustration was, and we'll probably come to that when I do his interview, with career conversations, was all about promotion, just the next role and what salary I'm going to earn. And that's important.
Yes.
But often the next role might not be that obvious. It could be it may be a role that way before you go that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to just building on that point as well, when you're more junior in your career, it's much easier to do those broadening assignments. If I was to go back now and say, hey, I'd love to be a marketing director for a bit, that's a much bigger ask of an organization. It can happen, but it's a bigger ask than me saying 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I'd like to have a stint in marketing, when it was much easier to enable that. So do look for those broad options whilst you've still got a lot of your career ahead of you.
Great. Okay, let's go into some of the questions. I'm just going to check the chat function, see if we've got anything coming through. Okay. All right, guys, fire anything you've got through. I've got some questions already pre-submitted here. So, Louise, did you always have a desire to grow your career in sales, or was there a moment in your career that was pivotal to encourage you down that path?
Yeah. Well, when I went into the marketing role at Procter & Gamble, I really was debating whether that was the way to go, because I don't know whether people who are calling in know, but Procter & Gamble is incredibly brand-led, especially in Europe. So I thought, well, potentially that's the place to be. But the pivotal moment for me was I did the brand role, really enjoyed it, but it clarified for me that I love the adrenaline that comes with sales. I really miss that. I love the immediacy, the agility you need. I really enjoy, bizarrely, maybe there's something wrong with me, but I enjoy being in customer meetings where you're under pressure and you've really got to think on your feet, versus being in an agency meeting where honestly they're pretty nice to you and it's all a little bit fluffy. So it brought it home that my skill set and my preferences meant sales was the way to go. And certainly in Australia, in the market that we're in, say sales is where it's at. So,
well, I'm ambidextrous, sales and marketing, but I do have a soft spot for sales. Okay, how do you see leadership evolving over the next 5 years?
I think that's an interesting question. So I think leadership's always evolving, and we're always raising the bar on what people expect. But I think the big impacts are the fact that we're going to have to be far more okay with technology, able to use it. I think we're going to need to be even more agile. So the digital world puts all brands on an even playing field. So small, nimble players can come and just have impact and presence. So a leader is going to need to be able to navigate that, which means lots of innovation, being able to be agile, and transform very, very quickly. And I think there's just more and more demand, and you said the word earlier, for authentic leadership. And I don't know how anyone can lead any other way. But I don't think we've got places to hide anymore. I think it's more personal, more authentic, more connected. It's very much, there's more one-to-one expectation of a leader as well, not sort of just addressing the crowd, but being able to tailor that to the audience much more.
Great. I've just jumped to the full chat function so I can read it. Just about. How important is international experience in building a sales career in Australia?
Look, I think certainly on my CV, the fact that I have that UK experience has pretty much been called out by every recruiter that I've spoken to. So I assume that it is important. I think, though, international is just another way of broadening. So if you've managed to broaden within Australia and you've done different functional things, maybe a bit in category, maybe a bit in commercial finance, maybe just a variety of roles across different customers, I think, that's a big part of the answer. But international is always going to be helpful for sure.
Okay.
What's your view there? I mean, you're probably very well placed.
I think we have a particularly in FMCG, a landscape here which is quite unique.
That's true.
And with a very dominant grocery, I guess, marketplace, which has actually held a lot of FMCG companies in good stead during the pandemic. But if other markets around the world are more diverse, and I think Australia and FMCG companies have been trying to become more diverse over the last few years. So I think if you've got experience in other channels, which often in Australia, things like HoReCa, food service, e-com have been seen as kind of secondary, not that important, where they're much more on the agenda right now. And if you've worked in organizations or markets where those are bigger channels, then that experience is really critical. So just from a practical point of view, that's one reason I think international experience is useful.
Certainly is. And if you're lucky enough to already be part of a global organization, connecting in with your international counterparts is not as good, but it's still a pretty good proxy for getting the experience yourself. At least understanding what's going on in those markets.
Great. Really interesting question here. As you've moved into more senior sales positions, how has your contact with customers changed, and how do you influence customers effectively at more senior levels?
Great question. I think first of all, it's really important, I think, at every level, certainly of the sales function and even for the CEO or GM, to be really connected with customers. And to Mike's point, especially in this market where there's such a strong duopoly, but even customers beyond. So certainly at Pepsi, I maintained really good contact across petrol and convenience, distributors, obviously Coles and Woolies, Metcash, Aldi, etc. And I think the way that it changes is that it's obviously less frequent. So instead of weekly face-to-faces with customers when I was a NAM, on bread, and an MBM, on bread, it's now become possibly a monthly for some, a quarterly for others, even 6 monthly for some others. But it really is about the conversations that you have, which need to be much more strategic, a long-term frame, and the big things that we really see are going to move the dial. And for a customer to want to keep meeting with me, I need to be able to bring value to that meeting. So it's always about growing their business. It's about insights that we've got to unlock something, as I said, for that longer term.
Good question. A few more come through. So this is an interesting one. How do you, as a sales leader or a senior leader in an organization, identify or become aware of a product or a startup that could disrupt you and what you're doing?
I think any business person has got to be really connected to what's going on out there. So what are the competition doing? What's going on overseas? And really being connected through, I leverage the marketing teams for that, the category teams for that, the shopper teams for that. Also connecting into other arms of the organisation overseas to see what they're seeing. And I think that way, as long as you're connected with what's out there, also what's really connected to the consumer, their boss, the shopper is king, Those ways you usually see what's about and what might be coming, but you're never going to see everything. And I think as I said, everything is becoming faster moving. There's far more complexity out there. I think it's really important for organizations to keep innovating and take a real sort of, you might call it seed and develop approach or test and trial approach. So instead of just trying to go big scale all the time, look for little things and then have a go with them and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, great. So be bold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Time for one more question. We're getting towards wrap up, but okay. Interesting question. Lots of talk about sales and marketing. What is your view of category and the role it plays in an organization? Now, that's my third area of passion is category. Yeah. So
and me. Yeah. Do you know, I'm really glad you've asked that. I think it was Steve who's asked that, so thank you. I've probably fallen into the trap a little bit of, for me, category in my head is part of sales, and I'll tell you why. Because in Procter & Gamble, they call sales customer business development, because we only win in sales if we develop our customers' businesses. And a sales career at Procter & Gamble is literally sales and category, and you oscillate between a sales role and a category role. So I literally, through my career, those sort of 14 years, apart from the one stint in marketing, went from a sales role to a category role to a sales role to a category role. And I think category is absolutely key. And if you haven't done a category role, please go and do one, because it's the other half of the sales function is category. And sales really hones your selling and negotiation skills with the customer, your planning skills, your optimization skills, your commercial skills. Category just gives you the insight into the only thing that's going to give you sustainable growth, which is understanding how to grow and impact the whole dynamic and the whole category. So really important. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the function I think is under the spotlight the most at the moment through COVID.
Okay.
I think a lot of organizations in FMCG are looking to the category function for leadership.
Yeah.
To find the certainty about what that future might look like. And I think in my experience, a lot of companies have found their category function very short-term focused.
Yeah.
And not that many are strategically long-term focused. And we're seeing restructures actually. So there's opportunities in category.
Yeah.
Because that 1 to 2 year horizon is critical, because that's the moment you're living in. But that 3 to 5 year horizon right now is really difficult to get your head around.
Yeah.
But it's where I think some category functions are missing that kind of long-term strategic vision.
Yeah. I would agree with that, and it's certainly what the customers are hungry for. They're looking for 3 to 5 year guidance. Going back to that previous meeting about the meetings that you'd have at a senior level, that's the time frame that you need to be able to talk to. And you're absolutely right. You look at the category is where the sort of commercial strategy feeding roles come from, and it's a critical part of a rounded leader. So yeah.
Fantastic. Guys, we're getting towards 9, so I know some people have got meetings to go to. So we'll wrap up now. Louise, thank you for taking the time out today. It's very generous.
My pleasure.
Very candid, really interesting view on your career. And your career, like everybody's career, is unique. I think the difference and why I'm running this session is I want to talk with people who have reached the top of their career and understand how they've done that. Now we're going to hear from a diverse group through this series, so I'm really looking forward to each interview as it comes, and understanding about those pathways, the successes, the mistakes, the learnings, how people deal with that. But the critical part to me is around decision making. So and I think Louise has talked a lot about some of the conscious ways in which she makes decisions, that getting out of the comfort zone, backing herself, confidence without ego. There's some really interesting themes there. It'd be great to hear from our future sales directors about how they approach that as well. Because the whole program has been set up to equip you, our future leaders and sales directors, with the knowledge to have better career conversations. We've touched on often the quality of those career conversations isn't good enough, and if I can help through this program address that and equip you with the capability and confidence to go into those career conversations to get more out of them, then with a broader, more lateral mindset, then with a kind of olive career view as opposed to the next role in front of me view, then I think we've done a really good thing. There's a lot more questions came through, guys. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And if you have follow-ups too, please send them through to myself or Hazel. I think Hazel's been corresponding with most of you. Otherwise, miked@axr.com.au. We'll also send a link back for this the Sales Director Attribute Survey. We'd love your contribution for that. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next session, 2 weeks' time, July 23rd, where I'll be interviewing Swati Prasad, who's the Sales Director of Unilever's Home, Beauty and Personal Care business. So guys, thanks for joining us. Louise, thank you. And everybody have a great Thursday. Thanks now.
Enjoy. All the best. Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.